looking 6 years back, how that soldering was like mission impossible, it's very important because when we have that flat, it's just like sticking together. Like put some balls on your rings or just some kind of wire to attach to your piece. Nothing will happen, just oxidation will win the game. Just melting where it's touching, and that road is just like, whoa. The biggest mistake I used to make all the time. Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, of course, it's soldering. I wanted to do this video for quite some time now, but I was thinking how to give you the most easy explanation that I could give you. So basically it was about that, because when it comes to soldering, everything looks very easy, but when you're actually doing that, it's not that easy. And yes, from the nightmare, you can come to that second nature, and I will give you the best tips I can give you from my experience, you know, looking 6 years back, how that soldering was like mission impossible and how it is easy to do now. Of course, it depends on the project, but mainly when it comes to basic soldering, it is easy, but it becomes that way. Because I'm self-taught, so that means I made so many mistakes and nobody told me that. Maybe you should put more heat there. Maybe it's not flat enough. Maybe, you know, so many maybes. So my mission is to make that soldering as simple as it can be. And I will give you my codex, how I'm doing that soldering. I want to give you those key points when it comes to soldering that you have to pay attention the most. And I'm 100% sure if you will keep attention to those key points, your soldering will get way better, like way better. Soldering itself is not hard. It becomes hard just because you're putting yourself to solder and you're like timing yourself there. Because it feels like you have to act so quick because the piece is like melting, or maybe it's just changing the color and you're like rushing to solder, and that's the main problem when you're soldering, really. You have to pay attention to certain things when you're soldering and do certain things before you're soldering your piece. When I started my jewelry making journey, I was working with copper, and I was working with that metal for 2 years because I was kind of scared to jump on silver. Silver looked more expensive, you know, like you have to be shaky hands when you're working with that. It's nonsense, like it is, but your head just creates a vision that it's something impossible to reach. Copper is very nasty metal to work with. We have ton of oxidation there. Timing is ridiculous. You have to work pretty quick just to solder it. So I made my tasks even harder if you would compare to silver. All of the things I'm teaching myself. So I'm questioning everything. And I try to make information as simple as it can be, that I could understand, that I could pay attention, that I could be quick like that I could see like 4 things in front of my eyes when I'm actually soldering. So what to look for? The main core for soldering is clean, flat, timing, and heat. So when we're talking about clean is the most important thing when you're actually soldering, because on a dirty surface, solder won't flow. Nothing will happen, just oxidation will win the game. Clean piece means no fingerprints on the piece, no dust on the piece, no other oils on the piece. Everything has to be clean. When you want clean surface, go with wet and dry before. Take a sponge, something not very abrasive, and make that surface uneven level. I go through my pieces with 1000 wet and dry papers, sometimes even more abrasive stuff. It depends what I'm doing. If I need that piece would be mirror shine later on. So be careful not to go with very abrasive one because you have to get rid of those marks later on. But this is the easiest way how you can make sure that your piece is clean. So clean is the most important part. Never skip that extra step, because it makes a difference. It flows beautifully too. And that clean also brings us to flat. Components that you want to solder on your piece or solder 2 parts together has to be flat where it's touching and where you want to solder. It's very important because when we have that flat, it's just like sticking together. If we have gaps and not even edges, nothing is touching that well. And solder is just not having where to flow. It's like spreading somewhere because the heat is hitting and it's like blah. Yeah, we saw a lot of blah because when your piece is not touching and we have like smallest gaps in between, that solder is just like lost, you know? It's just melting where it's touching and that road is just like, whoa, you know? Like we don't want that solder would be lost. We want that it would flow beautifully through that touching point. That's very important. If we're soldering bezel setting, we're putting wet and dry on our table and just rubbing that because we have that 90 degrees, everything is flat. The piece will tell you everything. When you will sand with wet and dry, when it would be on the flat surface, you will see those parts which is touching and which is not. So you have to sand that you would have that even, beautiful surface made for your soldering. I want to announce that this video is sponsored by Rio Grande. It's a jewelry supply store where you can find a lot of things for your jewelry making, and they're giving you a code with $20 off of your shipping price, so use it while we have it. Thank you, Rio Grande, for sponsoring this video. When we have all prepared, everything is clean, flat spaces, then we come to solder. In soldering station, everything is about heat and timing. And the movement, of course. When it comes to heat, it was the biggest mistake I used to make all the time because I wasn't heating my piece enough that that solder would flow. I was scared that everything will melt, and that's very bad when you want to solder bigger pieces, when you want to attach more details to your piece as well, because you have to be aware. The more metal you will put, the more parts you want to solder, even the smallest things you will attach to your piece, like put some balls on your rings or just some kind of wire to attach to your piece, it will need way more heat than you would expect. And I didn't expect that. I was always like counting, okay, it's just a small thing, how much heat we need. But we actually do need a lot, especially if we're soldering flat spaces on top of each other. So that is another level of heat need. Like really, you need a torch, bigger torch, or you have to work with oxygen. I'm not working with oxygen. I'm still working with gas. I don't know, oxygen just makes me scared and I don't have that much ventilation in my space that I could work with that. If you think that with small torch, you can actually solder pieces, when I started, I had like tiny torch and I was like, okay, we're working with tiny pieces, so it will be enough. And it wasn't enough. If you're working with gas, you want bigger flame because you can have like small flame with gas and it would be like hot enough. You want flame, actual flame from your torch, which this guy is pretty hardcore, I would say. And when it comes to oxygen, it's totally different vibe. In a small flame, you can have a lot of heat and you can control it as well, which we can't control that much when it comes to gas. And when we're talking about heating our pieces, another thing comes out when it comes to timing. If you're playing with smaller torch and with smaller flame, sometimes it might work. But you have to know that hot spot pretty well that you could play with that smaller one, because I was stuck with that mistake quite a long time. So I was still trying my best to solder with smaller flame. But when I was playing around that much with smaller flame, I actually got very good at heat spot. When I'm talking about heat spot, I'm talking about the hottest space of the flame. And if you will nail this, you will become very good at soldering. Every torch would be different, and that heat spot will hit differently if you're working with gas. If you're working with oxygen, that's a bit different story. When we're working with bigger torches like this, we have like big flame. So to understand where that part is the hottest part is pretty hard if you're not practicing enough. That's why they say practice makes perfect. And with soldering, you have to practice a lot, that you would get that intuition where that heat spot is. The best way to practice that heat spot is just melt metal a lot. Just practice on smaller scraps, bigger scraps. and then you can actually have time to understand how the piece is melting. Because if you're not holding that heat spot in the right place, it will melt a bit, it will come to red, it will melt a bit, it will come to red. And with your torch, you actually have to be not as close as you think. That heat spot, usually it's more far away from your piece, not like inside your torch. It looks like it should be closer to the torch, but actually it's not. So yeah, make sure you have the right torch for your piece. Usually when the piece is bigger or we're attaching more details to the piece, it will take more time to heat up the piece. The more you will spend on heating up, you will oxidize your piece quicker, because oxidation is like straight dirty and our solder is just like lost. It's like in the cage of that dirt, and we don't want to have that. So that's why when we're working with our pieces, we want to be quite quick, but you still have time. More metal, more heat. That's the main rule. I could talk for hours when it comes to soldering. So the last thing I want to tell you about soldering is solder itself. Melting temperature will depend on your solder as well, because we have soft, medium, and hard in the market. I'm working just with a hard solder. I never worked with easy or medium. I never been in that game, so I don't know how it feels like. I'm always struggling with the hard because I want my piece would have as much silver as it can have. Even in the hard silver solder, we have about 80% of silver there. So, you know, it lowers your quality of the work if it's like less percentage. At least I say that to myself, and the color is way better, because when your piece will oxidize, you will see a tiny line there and you don't want to see any yellow. And when it comes to easy solder, it's very yellow and I don't want to play with that. Everybody do what they want to do when it comes to jewelry making. Usually I'm very abusive with my pieces as well, so I need a hard solder. I really do. When we talk about solder, always make sure that you have very thin sheet, because when you have thin sheet and you're cutting your solder pieces out, even the bigger one won't be that much of a solder. Thinner sheet will heat up way quicker than that thicker sheet of metal. So when you're cutting that small piece of solder, it is important how thick that solder is. When you will be heating up, that solder will heat up way quicker than that thick one would do. Okay, I think I have to stop myself because I will be talking about it way more. So we need more videos about soldering for sure. More you will do, more it will become like a second nature. Of course, even with a lot of practice that I do have now, I have days when solder is just like not going. So I'm just checking all the key points again, and usually it solves problems. I try to keep it as simple as I can. I hope I explain it well. Ask me questions in the comments. I will answer them for sure. Oh, and one thing I want to add, I just remembered, that's important, because when you are soldering, and let's say it's not beautiful solder flow, you have just a bit, or it's not flowing, just stop what you're doing, put that piece in a pickle, take all that oxide off, and usually that annealing, because what you did is anneal the piece, will make that piece extra clean, because you heat that up, everything burned. So when you will come to solder a second time, it will solder way better. If you're not lazy, anneal your piece before soldering. So just heat up the piece, pickle it, and you will have the cleanest sheet to work on, or the cleanest things that you're making to work on. I know I talked a lot, but you have to know all that information, and I want to give you even more, but we will have to spend like 2 days here, maybe even more. And I'm always like, oh, I have to mention that, I have to mention that. But in this video, the main thing is just to keep those key points that you could understand that core better when it comes to soldering. And we will talk about it more on my other videos. And I hope it was useful, and I hope you like it. And I will see you in my next one.